All right, welcome back to FYI, the For Your Institution podcast presented by Mongoose. I'm your host, Gil Rogers, and today I am excited to be joined by someone who really needs no introduction, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Marketing at Siena College and the host of the Application podcast and all-around forward thinker, thought leader, smart cookie, whatever you want to call her, Dr. Allison Turcio. Allison, thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you on the podcast. Before we hop in, and I'm going to be completely forward with the audience. We don't have a big script. We don't have a big outline. We're just going to riff for 25, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe 6 hours. Who knows? But before we do that, I'd love for you to hop in, give yourself a quick introduction, say hi to the audience, and talk a little bit about the application podcast and how that all came about.
Hi, everyone. Allison, I think you did a great job introducing me. I'm not sure how much to add, but I've been at Siena College for almost 17 years now. I'm also an adjunct professor of marketing at the college. So that's really exciting that I get to spend time in the classroom with students in addition to my quote unquote day job. I just finished my doctorate at Northeastern University.
Yay.
And as you said, I'm the host of the Application podcast, which is a podcast hosted by Enrollify, part of their podcast network. And it's very focused on, as the name would imply, doing. So here's the challenge. What are the solutions? How do we actually do something about it? So I try to have guests who have done it so then they can share with the rest of us. Here is the actions to take. So it's shorter episodes, very actionable, and I'd love it if you all listen to one.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And for those who are listening to our podcast, we will put a link to Allison's podcast in the episode notes. So it'll be very easy for you to bridge over after listening today. Don't bridge over until you're done listening today.
No, you're going to want to hear this. We have a fun idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. So before we hopped on, for everyone who is listening and watching, we were talking a little about, all right, the structure, the format, that sort of stuff. I had thrown out the idea of just having a conversation and leading off with one question around what is the biggest challenge facing enrollment marketers today? And then Allison had an even better idea where she said, let's play a little volleyball with it and we'll kick us off and we'll go back and forth and just talk about a lot of the challenges facing enrollment marketers today. With all that said, volley to you, Allison, you are going to kick us off with your first thought, and then I'll take one, you'll take one, and we'll share and respond to each other's thoughts on the biggest challenges facing enrollment marketers today. So with that, bump, set, spike, you.
Challenge number one is taking care of what you need to take care of in the moment. For instance, in yield season and achieving that class, whatever goal is set for you at your institution, but also looking out into the future. So that balance of what do you need to do right now to make your class versus setting up the future classes. I think that's a really hard challenge for all of us.
I'm with you on that one, and I'll add to it before volleying back with my own is, and it was last week I posted on the LinkedIn machine around, it was a message to vendors in the higher ed space about being respectful of the fact that enrollment marketers and enrollment managers right now are heads down heading into, and depending on when this podcast drops, it'll be after May 1st. So this, prior to May 1st, it's always heads down on hitting the class, heads down on yield. So be respectful of that and be mindful of that. People aren't going to want to meet. They're not going to want to take the time unless they have a really good established relationship with you already. But the flip of that is everything you just said, where, enrollment leaders have this challenge of having their feet to the fire of today, but needing to try to look to the future. And that look to the future oftentimes gets forgotten about because of the feet to the fire today. So while they should potentially be having meaningful conversations and planning for the next class, you're so caught up in the moment with blinders on that you're in this vicious cycle where you don't get to plan ahead. So you're constantly playing catch up, and everything is a fire year round. And that becomes the vicious cycle of higher ed.
Yeah, especially if you're working at an institution that's mostly supported by undergraduate tuition revenue.
Absolutely.
You feel that on your shoulders. So if you're feeling that right now, I'm with you. You feel that on your shoulders that your operating budget is a go or not based on you hitting this mark. And so we feel the pressure of that. And so when you're feeling that pressure, it's really hard to be forward looking.
Absolutely. And I'll go back to my point about if this episode drops either before or after May 1st, I guarantee you, even if it's after May 1st, most tuition-driven institutions are still going to be recruiting their class and still focusing on yield, because you are up until census date, right? Even beyond that. So that's a huge one. We could just stop the episode there. That's the top challenge, but we will keep going. So I think about this a lot because, there was a lot that happened, through the pandemic and the shift to digital, and then the challenges of keeping that going while also being able to get back to in-person programs. And so there's this, I remember it happening during the height of the pandemic, where it was virtual is here to stay, where this is a key part of the program. People like you were already doing a lot of the virtual stuff that a lot of people picked up during the pandemic before the pandemic. But then now I feel like there's this desire to clamor back to the things that we were doing before: college fairs, in-person high school visits, hosting large scale campus events and programs, which I'm not saying don't host large scale campus events and open houses, but the juggling of what was proving to work during COVID, what outlying situation is what it is, but now kind of trying to integrate those things into our day-to-day, I feel like is a big challenge, given lack of people, lack of time, lack of financial resources to do it all. So I feel like that juggling the virtual and the in-person programs is still a big challenge that enrollment managers are facing. I don't know if you agree or not, sitting in the seat that you do.
I definitely agree. And it's about finding what is still working and being very intentional about that data and how you're looking at it, so that you're not doing everything under the sun. You can't. We don't have the resources. I don't think any of us have the resources to be able to do that. So you have to be really intentional about what you're choosing to do. So there's a balance between the virtual and the in-person. There has to be. We still have people signing up for virtual, but we're very intentional and audience driven in the topics that we'll do for virtual. Really make sure that they're student or parent driven, things that are on their minds, not things that we want to say. So it's not like all the wonderful things we could tell you about Sienna. It's more about trying to meet them in the moment, help them with whatever they're worried about right now, whether it be financial aid, whether it be how do I make a final decision, how do I construct a college list. So that's how we're really trying to focus that virtual. And they get to come and understand your institution by the nature of providing that information. It does not need to be about Sienna all of the time. And they often transition to an in-person visit. So I think it's about thinking of it also as a 1-2 step, so offer something of value to your audience in virtual format, and they will then come to your in-person format.
Yep. I used to equate it to the fact that when institutions launched websites, they didn't get rid of campus visits, right? They in fact, they probably saw more campus visits because now you've opened up this method of registering for the campus visits. When we launched Facebook pages, we didn't drop our website, right? It became an extension of our website. When we started doing text messaging, we didn't stop doing emails, right? There's a balance of integrating these types of tactics together. And I feel like, and I can, hindsight being 2020, looking at a lot of this now, and 2020 was a bad year, but anyway, hindsight being 2020, it's the challenge of, the people who don't see value in virtual content and virtual events, call it whatever you want, are the people who weren't doing it right during the peak of the pandemic and didn't
so they don't
apply
have
any
data.
lessons. And so,
their data maybe shows that it wasn't working, but it might have been format, might have been topic, might have been the fact that you weren't putting students out and you were putting yourself on camera. Put students on camera.
Yep. And that's the key, right? And it's another one of those points where it's like, back in the day, it was the most popular thing at our open house is the student panel. And then you have the light bulb moment. We should showcase students more. And then it's, the most popular thing at our regional program is when we bring a student with us and have them talk, oh, maybe we should showcase students more. And then all of a sudden, when you had to do virtual content, it's the admissions officer talking about the application process is the most important piece of content we can use. Doesn't make any sense, right? And so we need to apply lessons, not just back off of things because the way we did it wasn't working when it's working for everybody else. right? There's a key opportunity there.
All right, my turn, right?
Your turn.
So I'm going to just go and put it out there, budget. So I went to American Marketing Association conference back in November, and I went to the session led by Google, and they shared a slide that showed that colleges and universities are spending 2 times more on advertising than they were in 2019. So that's a big increase. And I don't
Yeah.
think most colleges can sustain that kind of marketing budget increase. And we're not competing just with colleges and universities for eyeballs. We are competing with Netflix. We're competing with their friends. We're competing with Nike. You know, we're the consumers we want are the consumers everybody wants. So we have to think differently than just throwing more money at it, because there is no amount of money that can be thrown at marketing that can work when we're competing with Nike and Netflix. So we have to think differently about how we're spending our money, I think.
Yeah, I on the I can't even talk on the ad spend component. That's interesting to me, because I would love to understand how many institutions who have ratcheted up their ad spend have also ratcheted up their effort on measuring the impact of that ad spend. Are they just pointing to the homepage of the website? This was a big problem when institutions started doing digital advertising. Is, yeah, okay, great, you're driving traffic to your site, but it's just to your homepage. You're not driving to a landing page with a call to action. You're not driving to any content to engage with. And so how are we actually measuring the impact of that ad spend? Because all it's going to take is one poor enrollment cycle for that ad budget to get completely slashed, because you don't have any data to demonstrate that it's actually working, right? So by all means, invest in digital media, right? That is important.
And we desperately need, standard of living increases, or we can't keep up, right? I just think that for a lot of colleges, doubling what they were spending in 2019, that's not possible. So if not that, what else can you be doing?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is, at least, I know in my experience working with institutions, again, not to harp on the pandemic, but a lot of people took pandemic dollars that took things they would use for travel and campus events and catering and those sorts of things, and they used it for other services and programs like advertising. And now there's going to come a point of reckoning where they have to find a way to do it all, and it's not going to be all at the same levels, right? Yeah. So there's some calibration that needs to happen. Sure.
Well, either that or they cut during the pandemic, which what must have been a big mistake for most colleges. The college was so smart, and they actually invested in marketing during the pandemic, and we got a 4 times return on that investment.
Oh, so you actually tracked the outcomes of the things you were doing?
We increased. So for every extra dollar that we had for that pandemic boost that we got to the marketing budget, we returned $4 to the college.
Wow. That's a lesson for everyone. Yeah. If you can't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? And measure what matters. And if financial investments in digital media tools, et cetera, are what matters, right? So great. That's great work. Congratulations to your team on those types of outcomes, for sure.
Grow your student community, give them a reason to stay, and encourage giving with Cadence, higher ed's premier engagement platform from Mongoose. Talk to students, parents, and alumni on their time and how they want. Empower your staff with integrated text and chat inboxes that gather all conversations in one place. Learn more at mongooseresearch.com to see how our best-in-class service and support has helped colleges and universities like yours have smarter conversations.
All right, back to me. I am going to say that we are going to continue to have challenges associated with things like Great Resignation, quiet quitting, the issue of we've become very reliant as an industry on very highly motivated, student-focused people that will put in the extra time, put in the extra effort because it's the right thing to do, as we should, right? It's a higher calling than a lot of industries, but you can only push humans so far, right? And when there's consistent pushback and consistent budget issues and consistent just challenges to deal with, we're losing people, right? We're hemorrhaging talent, we're hemorrhaging people from the industry. And the people who are staying, many are just kind of dealing with the issues and punching the clock. That's not to say everyone is, and I don't want listeners to think that I'm targeting you. There are a lot of very, very, very committed and hardworking people in this industry, but you can only push human beings so far. And there's got to be ways to identify efficiencies to make their lives and jobs easier in better support of student success. So I'll kick it to you for your feedback and thoughts on that opinion and perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perspective that a lot of people are having right now. I mean, Eric Hoover this spring just put out an article about the Great Resignation in enrollment admissions areas. And I think enrollment and marketing is all tied into that too. So I think there's two things to think about. I think it's like what's within your control and within your team and what you can do, right? So, and really be listening to what the needs are from your team and trying to adjust to those needs. So we have our own sphere of influence, right? Of course, then we're at the institution level, and we do have a responsibility to have a sphere of influence there, because as marketers, I think we all understand how important the student experience is to really setting our marketing efforts on fire, right? A great student experience and word of mouth is worth more than any kind of ad campaign that I can ever run, which will be helpful because we're never going to be able to get to those budgets, right? We just talked about that. But you cannot have a great student experience if you don't have a great employee experience. So I think we have a way as marketers to be that voice on campus about how important the employee experience is to the student experience and to everything else. Everybody at every college wants a better brand reputation, right? Everybody wants more brand awareness. Nobody wants to be the best kept secret. And one of the ways that we do that is attending to employee experience so we can attend to student experience. So I think that's a role that we can play.
I'm with you. Support you 100%. And I think that I boil it down to, again, helping identify efficiencies and processes and taking out redundancies, right? And embracing technologies that help make lives and jobs easier.
It doesn't always have to be more. I think in higher ed, we often think of, we have new ideas and stuff when we pile on more and more. What are we going to stop doing too? What's not working anymore? So
certainly,
it's not just about adding more, but it's about doing things in a different way, to your point about efficiencies and leveraging technology.
Yep, absolutely. All right, volley to you. I think we have time for one more each.
All right, I'm going to go with everyone looking and sounding the same. We like to think that we're different from other colleges, but we're not always that different. So I think there's a challenge in finding what's special about us and how you translate that to an audience without looking and sounding like the same as everybody else.
I hear you. I presented at a conference a few years ago, and we tried to do the old golden circle, Simon Sinek, start with why element. And we had every institution in the room try to share their unique why their institution exists. And the reality is we have a very common why, right? Everyone's why is to help advance education, to help students prepare for a career. At the high level, we all have a very similar why. Yeah. It's our how and what's that are different at many institutions. And so we have to communicate, and we'll put in the speaker notes, the video to the golden circle, because I feel like if you haven't watched it, it's an oldie, but a goodie. Anytime there's anybody on a YouTube video using a flip chart, writing on a flip chart, it's a good video.
I do like those too.
Yeah. And so that's distinguishing the hows and the why, the hows and the whats are important, because that's where our unique campus community is. That's where that feeling of fit is. That's where there's the unique programs that you're super strong in and are the differentiators. Those are how we've got to communicate. And it's about communicating that well, and that goes into targeting, it goes into modeling, it goes into a bunch of other things, from how we develop our communication plans and communication pools. That could be its own separate podcast, because there's a whole separate channel on that. So
for sure. And then it's about showing versus just telling. So for instance, for Siena, we are a Franciscan college. So that is a very other-centered kind of culture. Mm-hmm. And a lot of schools will speak to that, right? Being student-centered, community, and all that. But what we try to do is we try to show students that they're most important to us by how we recruit them and how we talk to them and talk to their parents. versus just telling them, oh, Siena has a great community. So I think if you can find ways to show versus just tell, that is where the power really is.
And we got to get away from small class sizes, easy access to faculty. If you want to join a club, or you can start one, and we're near some city that's within a couple hours, right? That's every school's college fair blurb, right? So we need to communicate that.
It's also the minimum of what's expected. Like it's expected your professor's going to know your name. So it's not special to say your professor's going to know your name. Maybe if you say your professor's going to know your name and is going to know what you want for your future and mentor you on that path, then you can talk about something that's different. But it's the least they expect is that the professor will know your name. So we have to also understand what the minimum expectations are of our audience, because we just sound lame if that's all we're talking about.
Exactly. All right, I get the benefit of last ups. Right? So we're going to switch to a baseball analogy. Last ups. Hopefully, this is a walk-off home run. I'm going to go with the topic du jour, which is how we are going to address and incorporate things like AI, ChatGPT into our role, specifically with enrollment management, enrollment marketing. Every other industry in the world tends to move faster than higher ed. So there's already things that are happening where, tools are getting integrated into CRM. They're getting integrated into our communication platforms. So I feel like the benefit of a skill in, prompt engineering is going to be something that we need to figure out how to infuse that into the work that we do, because that is a key way that we're going to address the issue I was talking about before, which is redundancies and repetitive work, right? And so I feel like it's not necessarily a challenge facing enrollment marketing. It's more of an opportunity, but the challenge is how do we take advantage of that opportunity?
I think the challenge is how we take advantage of that opportunity, but still remain human in how we're connecting with students.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's the being really good at the prompts on the front end, but then editing on the back end to make it personal and really still leave that student feeling special in every communication. So that's going to be a new skill set that we all have to be on this road together and develop.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, not looking and sounding alike, right? Because the robot is going to describe schools the way we've described schools on our websites for decades, which is going to be the same blurb that everybody has, the basic expectations. So it's going to be going beyond just basic inputs. I think, one of our earlier podcasts this season on FYI, we had, the founder of Mongoose and their chief technology officer on, talking about the value of incorporating, and using things like ChatGPT. If you put in a super basic prompt, you're going to get a super basic response back.
Exactly.
If you do a better job of crafting your prompt, you're going to get a better response back. And so learning and applying those skills, using things like ChatGPT is going to be a skill, just like Excel, PowerPoint, Word, all those sorts of things, right? There's HTML, Java, you name it. Prompt engineering will be a skill, and training for that skill and taking advantage of the people who do the work to get that skill is going to be a huge opportunity for higher ed, for sure.
I totally agree.
Cool. Awesome. So we'll say that was the walk-off home run. That was the ending topic. Let's bring it home, right? So cheap plug time. Let's remind everybody, where they can connect with you, where they can connect with your podcast, and any ways they can follow up with you and stay connected. And then we'll round it out from there.
Well, you can find me on Twitter while it still lasts. I'm on LinkedIn. And then, of course, my podcast called The Application, and you can find that by searching for Enrollify, the Application podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Allison, again, for your time and for being a part of this conversation. We hope everyone enjoyed it, and we will see you next time on FYI.